Oi, tudo bem? Acho que tu tá muted.
That's true. How's everything?
Good, thank you. And you?
Fine as well.
Ready for your presentation?
Yeah, have to, right? Have to be ready.
Oh, that's good. I think Peter is not here yet. Do you want to check if your the screen sharing is working well?
Exactly, I will. Let me share with you.
Cool.
Just a minute, please.
Yeah, it looks pretty.
Is it open? Oh, because I can't see. Let's see. Yeah, when I share the screen, I cannot see the others, right? But I can see you in a small screen. But I can see. Let me change the slides.
Yeah, I think you might need to put in the
Presentation mode.
Yeah, presentation mode. And then you know, on Zoom you have that view mode on top. You might change to gallery rather than just speak up, because then you might be able to see more people, but not many, but just the ones on the side.
Where is it?
Can you see on the top, on the right hand corner on top, you have view, and then you have
show grid video. Nope.
No.
Hi everyone, and welcome wherever you're tuning in from today. This is the 6th in the International Perspectives on Corpora for Language Learning seminar series held in collaboration with the University of Queensland, the State University of Sao Paulo, and our friends in Europe and other places who are also joining us today. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Adriane Orenha-Ottaiano from the State University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, who today is going to be presenting on the applications of corpora, DDL, data-driven learning, and phraseology in the development of collocational and phraseological competence. And I'm sure that is something that we would all like to develop. Even myself could always do with more knowledge of collocates and phrases. And particularly if you are a second language learner, whether that's of English or Portuguese, that's what we're here to learn about today. If I could just ask you to stop sharing that screen just for 1 second while I just bring up our...
Okay.
You got that, Adriane? Yep, okay.
So yeah, I stopped sharing, yeah.
Here, just again, as we do with every public event here in Australia, just to show you here the acknowledgement of country, where the University of Queensland, including internet provided by the University of Queensland, acknowledges the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet, and we pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country, and we recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So let's head back then to Adriane, if you want to start sharing your slides. And you can see, there we go, the participant numbers are already creeping up. So it is time now to begin our talk. So I'd just like to introduce Adriane first of all. Dr. Orenha-Ottaiano, who has worked as a lecturer and researcher at the Sao Paulo State University since 2010. And she holds a postdoctoral fellowship in translation from the Université de Montréal in Canada, a master's in linguistics and English literary studies from the University of Sao Paulo. She's the principal investigator at the funded project Online Corpus-based multilingual Collocations dictionary platform. and that probably has more syllables in it than any other title that I read recently, and is the founder leader of the CNPQ research group PhraseCorp, Corpus-based Phraseology and Collocations. She has experience in corpus-based phraseology and phraseography with a focus on collocations, and hopefully I might be able to understand what the difference between those two is by the end of the talk. Corpus-based lexicography, corpus-based translation studies, teaching English and Portuguese as a foreign language, and corpus linguistics. So you name it, Adriane probably has a corpus for it somewhere. So without any further ado, please, let's begin your talk, Dr. Orenha-Ottaiano.
Okay, let me just change the presentation mode. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. So I can see that there are some old friends here, so people have already met in congresses. A lot of Brazilians here taking part in this conference in this lecture with us. So it's a great pleasure to be here with everybody. So thank you, Peter, for the introduction. So as Peter said, my presentation is the applications of corpora, data-driven learning, and phraseology, the development of collocational and phraseological competence. So of course, let's start with some acknowledgements. So I'd like to thank Professor Peter Crosswade and Paula Tavares Pinto for this partnership, and Franciele for the organization of all arrangements of the event. So I also thank my university, São Paulo State University, the University of Queensland for also the partnership and the funding, FAPESP for funding one of my projects, our postgraduate program here at UNESP, and CAPES for CAPES Print project. So I'll briefly show you. I think that Paula had already done it last week, but there are some newcomers today. So this is our university. And as you can see, our university is characterized by being a multi-campus university. So that's Peter mentioned University of São Paulo, and we also have São Paulo State University. That's our university. So we have a lot of campuses, as you can see, 24 campuses spread in the state of São Paulo. Let me show you. This is the map of Brazil, and that's where São Paulo is. And as you can see, the campuses are all spread in the state of São Paulo. So ours is in the countryside as well. So São José do Rio Preto is here, as you can see. So, and that's another picture of our university. Okay, so according to the abstract, so you may have read it. So we have corpus linguistics as the main discipline. And then I also talked about the applications of corpora and data-driven learning. So consider that when you talk about data-driven learning, you're thinking of more direct contribution to learning, not just what to learn, but how to learn it. That's what we try to share with our students. We here at UNESP, at São Paulo State University, we have two courses. So we have a BA in translation and BA in languages. So we are preparing students to become teachers and translators. So that's what we like to share with them. So they want to, we like to share the idea of discovering the language, reflecting on the language. And that's an approach that uses tools as well as techniques of corpus linguistics for pedagogical purposes. And then we're also focusing on phraseology and phraseography. And then when corpus linguistics came up, so it gave rise to corpus-based phraseology and phraseography. And then all these disciplines and approaches are going to contribute to develop pedagogical material. So in foreign language teaching and translation training and teaching, that's the two of my target audiences and focuses, as I said, and also they have also contributed to the development of lexicographical resources. And all these pedagogical material and lexicographical resources help develop students' phraseological and collocational competence, and consequently their autonomy and fluency. I'll be talking about that as well. Okay, so that's just a minute, just close something here. Okay, so that's the outline of our presentation today. Where is it not coming up? It got stuck. Okay, there it is. So we'll be firstly talking about corpus-based phraseology. So we always drawing attention to the phraseological and collocational competence, DDL and corpora applications, and then we move to corpus-based phraseography, and then we'll focus on, as we'll be talking about the dictionary, where the dictionary of collocations we are compiling, as Peter has already mentioned at the beginning of his introduction. So we will focus on corpus-based phraseography and on changes, challenges, and future perspective, and also on, just a minute, also on the role of corpus-based dictionaries and the development of collocational competence, and finally contributions and some applications of corpus-based phraseology and phraseography to foreign language teaching. And I added translation as well because I forgot to do that in the abstract, but this is one of, so translators are one of my target audiences. So then I will talk about Platco, which is the platform of multilingual collocations dictionaries, and another platform I have to teach collocations, and some final remarks. Okay, so what is phraseology? What is its status? So phraseology is, I mean, there are three different views. So there used to be, maybe, I think that nowadays people now see phraseology as a discipline, as it says here, as an autonomous discipline of linguistics that analyzes the features of phraseologisms, their function and origin. We also have another view of phraseology. So some authors believe that it's a branch dependent on others, such as stylistics. So then you have phraseostylistics and lexicology, and also phraseology as an interdisciplinary position. So Ruiz Gurrillo, she's a Spanish author, also drew the attention to this aspect. So she said that the phraseological units can be described from all levels of the language: semantic, morphological, lexical, syntactic, pragmatic, and textual, showing their interdisciplinary character. But for us, we believe we see phraseology as a discipline, right? So as you see that there are many, when you talk about phraseologism, which is the object of phraseology, there is a wide range, a wide variety of denominations. So you see in the literature different, and this is a problem because sometimes, especially students don't know what we are talking about. Are we talking about phraseologisms? Are multi-word units different from phraseologisms or from phraseological units? There are some writers who call them prefabricated blocks or prefabs, phraseological units, as I've just said. So there is a wide range of denominations, as I've just said, right? Okay, and as I said, corpus linguistics comes into scene, right? So, and then we're gonna have the use of corpora, right? The compilation of corpora, the exploration of corpora, computer tools have come up, and then the study of phraseological units started getting easier. So, and then, as I said, so corpus linguistics brought a lot of contributions to phraseology and phraseography. So a range of research possibilities opens up. And then we can say that nowadays we also have corpus-based phraseology thanks to corpus linguistics. So corpus linguistics helped and contribute a lot to phraseology. So if phraseology is a research field within linguistics aimed at investigating recurrent lexical combinations, as it studies a relatively autonomous scope of language and has an independent object, the phraseological units, as well as specific scientific and descriptive method, corpus-based phraseology has all these features, right? But the only difference that, not the only, but we see that some things will change due to that. We do all the investigations through corpora and computational tools for lexical and phraseological analysis. So the use of corpora in phraseological research has become essential, and there is a great impact for the area. So for many researchers, it would be, I mean, we cannot conceive the idea of investigating phraseological units without the use of a corpus, right? So electronic evidence of how words behave and are used. So it was more restricted in traditional phraseology. So corpus-based phraseology is consolidated nowadays as an area of expertise. Okay, so why should we then investigate phraseologisms? So first of all, we have to think of the idea that language is phraseological, and phraseological units are pervasive in title, text, in texts of all genres. And we also have to consider that even though there is no consensus on proportion of multi-word expressions in relation to the rest of the vocabulary, Jackendoff said that there are as many fixed expressions as there are unique lexical items in the dictionary. Other authors like Melchuk, he argues that fixed or multi-word expressions far outweigh single lexical items. So as you can see, as you all know, I think there are researchers here, professors, undergrad students, masters and PhD students. We all know that phraseological units are pervasive, they're everywhere. And as some writers say, there are more phraseological units than single lexical units, right? Okay, so relevance of corpus-based phraseology. So in the past 2 decades, I think that almost 2 decades already, research in phraseology has shown that lexical grammatical knowledge of learners is not enough if there is no perception of the natural and conventional phraseology aspect of the language. So in the past, teachers used to concentrate on the teaching of vocabulary, single lexical units, decontextualized. And when learners had to produce, when they had to speak, they would have to combine those words, and then they would have a lot of difficulties in having a more natural conversation, right? Okay, so corpus-based phraseology. Now we can see that there are new types of evidence, new ways to describe language, new ways to organize data and the evidence, and consequently, new theoretical conceptions, different views of language. After we started analyzing phraseological units in corpora, so our view has expanded, right? And consequently, all the theoretical precepts have changed a bit, right? So things we used to believe in the past are different nowadays due to corpus analysis. And also not only, we are thinking of lexical grammar as well. So if you think of the, especially in English, because English is a lingua franca, so that are more, the availability of material is much wider in comparison to other languages. So even grammar books have changed because now it's all, I mean, most of them are corpus based, and things they used to believe in the past are not the same nowadays. So we have new possibilities for exploring databases. So we have lots of tools. So we used to use a lot of wordsmith tools, right, in the past. Some people are also use it for different types of research, and then WoodCat to compile a corpora automatically. The sketch engine, now the scale. So it's a good tool to teach vocabulary in general, and also phraseologisms and collocations. Some online corpora, for example, Mark Davis' platform is also commonly used in data-driven learning. In terms of phraseologisms, so here I can mention a few of them, so in case you don't know. So what are the types of phraseologisms? So idioms are phraseological units, proverbs, collocations as well, phrasal verbs, binomials, slangs, routine formula, cliches, etc. So they were all types of phraseologisms. And then one of their features, because there are lots of features and we won't have time to talk about all of them today. We have to think of automatism. So phraseologisms belong to automatic acts in the linguistic production process, and automatic is the act of reproducing linguistic units without cognitive interpositions. So when you think of foreign language learners, so the idea is that they should reduce the processing effort. So Netzelhoff explains that it may be of interest to many non-native speakers and foreign language learners to reduce the processing effort of more complex phraseological units in order to develop fluency, as they naturally need to reduce this effort in order to convey their message more clearly. So it means that there should be a greater repertoire of learned collocations and other phraseological units. So the greater the repertoire, the more the communication can be streamlined. So if some writers believe that if a speaker has joined to match words at the moment of speaking, it will be like, it would take too much time for him. And then he won't speak fluently. So he has to count on this wide repertoire that they can restore from their mental lexicon and speak, right? Otherwise, it will become a boring conversation, or they won't be able to speak naturally. So our focus is on collocations now, because we've been talking about the dictionary of collocations and the platform to teach collocations in English and Portuguese. So what do we understand by collocation? So this is an example of an adverbial collocation. So we have highly competent. And collocations, to our view, are recurrent combinations. They are arbitrary. We're reviewing that, but anyway, for this talk, it's still like that, because the idea is that, is there any explanation? Why do we say, for example, Brazilians, if they think of, as we say in Portuguese, pedido, they're going to think of order. So they tend to say, influenced by their mother tongue, they tend to use make or do an order, but it's neither make nor do. So they have to use replace an order, right? So why? And then they ask, why is that so? Can't I use make or do? No, you can't, because language has conventionalized that the verb you use for order is place. So that's the idea of being arbitrary. There's no explanation for that. We have to accept what the language has already decided so. So they are conventionalized. We have to respect that convention. Otherwise, if you don't respect, you won't make yourself understood. They are pervasive, as I said. They are everywhere in all types of texts. They are lexically or syntactically fixed to a certain degree, have a more or less restricted collocational range. They are very specific of language and culture, obviously. And the collocability of their elements may vary significantly from one language to another. Well, so when we talk about collocational range, so the more generic a word is, the more senses it has, it attracts more collocations for each sense, right? So the higher its collocational range. And the more specific a word is, the fewer senses, so it attracts fewer collocations, so the lower its collocational range. So why is it important to learn collocations? So you use words more accurately, more precisely. You sound more natural when speaking or writing. You can use it also to vary your oral or written speech. So you use, as McCarthy says, you offer alternative ways of saying the same thing that might be more colorful, more expressive, more accurate. And that applies to Brazilian learners. So instead of using words like very, everything's very good, nice, you'll be able to exploit a wider range of the language. So instead of saying it's very cold and very dark, depending on the context, you may be more accurate. So if you say it was bitterly cold and pitch dark, the speaker will have an idea of how cold it is and how dark it is. Okay, and then this is also interesting because that's a very good reason to study collocations and also phraseological units. So to understand when a skillful writer departs from, let's say, conventional collocational pattern to create an effect. Okay, why is it stuck? Okay, so we can talk about journalists, poets, advertisers. So McCarthy gave an example, no place like Rome. So you have to understand, if you don't know there's no place like home, it will be difficult to understand what the advertiser meant by that, right? So you here have some examples. catch up with you later. So from catch up with you later, right? And then in Portuguese, we have an advertisement for a beer. So it says, it desce redondo, because when you drink it, it fits well. And then they start changing. For example, they're talking about sexism. So machism does not, as we say in Portuguese, desce redondo. So it does not fit nowadays. It's old fashioned. You're my better half. Red Bull gives you wings. Time fries, and so on and so forth. So I didn't have too much time to find a better advertisements. And for example, collocations can also be very restricted, sorry. And speakers of that language know it. They can complete, for example, if I say mitigating, probably native speakers of the language are going to think, okay, mitigating factor or mitigating circumstances. So if it's a chain, you may think of chain smoker, right? So they're close to, and they go together. In Portuguese, they have ledo. If you say ledo, we're going to think of engano. And crasso, the only word that would co-occur with crasso would be erro, right? Then in French, you have torrentiel, pluie, for example. So torrential rain. And then endurci, célibataire, a confirmed bachelor. So it varies according to the language. So let's see some applications. I'll be very fast this time, otherwise I don't have time for the second part I prepared. So I'll quickly talk about some applications of Corpora and DDL to translation, foreign language teaching, and research on translation as well. So the first one is the use of a parallel corpus. I'm going to mention the MUST corpus. So we are collaborators of MUST corpus. They are directed by Sylviane Granger and Marie-Aude Lefebvre. So they launched the multilingual student translation corpus project, and it's an international one, and it aims at collecting a large multilingual student translation corpus with rich, standardized metadata that combines insights from both learner corpus research and corpus-based translation studies. So these are some of the partners, and we are, as I said, collaborating from Portuguese into English corpus. So the translation was collected at UNESP from Portuguese into English, and it's made up of this specific subcorpus, like the FED MUST corpus, is made up of 20 newspaper texts in Portuguese. Each text has about, from 500 to 800 words. And it talks about environment, so environmental issues, politics, among other matters. So our students, translation learners, translated the text into English. And this subcorpus has about 205,000 words. So we published a paper focusing on talking about some collocational errors we found and how we can help students to improve and develop their collocational competence, right? So all these, the findings resulted from these research. This one I'm gonna just mention, and the other ones from my students have contributed with reflections for the dictionary, because we are analyzing students' difficulties, collocational errors, and having all those things in mind, we're going to help one of our target audience, which is learner translators and professional translators. So we extracted a collocation, and then we analyzed how students, so they gave different translations for that collocation, and then we checked the frequency and the statistical measures of those proposed collocations. And obviously there were many that were not frequently used in English. And then we brought to class, so we used the sketch engine, so we used word sketch, the concordance lines. So for example, that example is on corruption. So we try to help students find a more suitable collocation, translation for that collocation in English. So they had to reflect on that, and then they would probably, by analyzing the concordance lines and word sketch, they would probably offer better translational options for those collocations. So they could reflect on this issue. So that's another research that Alvis, if you don't mind, finished his master's, and we also published a paper called Translation Learning Corpus and Investigation of Collocations in the Translation of Newspaper Articles. So it's a similar approach, a similar methodological aspect. And so Emmanuel tried to find as well, analyze collocational errors and worked on suggestions or other translational options for those collocations. And then now he's preparing some activities based on DDL so that he could help these student translators improve their collocational competence, right? So he's using Sketch Engine and Scale to help this audience. Another one, Rocha, so he also finished his PhD and he focused on metaphorical phraseologisms, also used the same corpus I've just mentioned, right? And then obviously he analyzed data, and then he realized that he found out that students have a lot of difficulties in translation, obviously metaphorical phraseologisms. He wanted to identify whether university students propose conventional translations in the English language, and he found out that they have a lot of difficulties in translating such type of phraseologisms. And then Miguel, so another student of mine, so he's also comparing Brazilian Chinese collocational errors. So he's using the same corpus I've just mentioned, and he has already compiled another one from Portuguese into Chinese, because he's in China, he's teaching Portuguese at the university. So he used WeChat to recruit the students, and also Yucatan to receive the translations, and Tencent Cloud to store them. So he's already finished, he's already compiled this corpus, and he's already analyzing data. So Miguel and I are also, wrote a paper on proposals to teach collocations and collocations. So this time we used a corpus of the European Parliament. So we proposed some activities here, as you can see. And then in the scope of another research project I carried out, the compilation of corpus-based didactic materials and specialized dictionaries of collocations. So we focus, for example, on these three words in English, because when we think of the word doença in Portuguese, these may be at least three possibilities to translate doença. It's very complex. So that word, I always had some, in 1998, I went to New Zealand that was my first trip abroad. And I remember I asked, my host mother had a daughter and she was studying medicine, and I asked her, what's the difference between illness, sickness, and disease? And she said, well, to tell the truth, I don't know how I would explain that. I'll think about it and I'll let you know later on. But then I forgot to ask, she forgot to tell me. So instead of asking what's the difference, we have, I think, the best ways to analyze concordance lines. So students, translation students love that, because they had to, they said, oh, if I had known that, I would have translated my text more naturally. And they said, I made a mistake there because I used illness and it should be disease, whatever. So they started analyzing, so that by analyzing the satellite words, so they understood the differences between these three words. So they started thinking, oh, psychiatric illness, mental, respiratory, and then some verbal collocations. So then we moved on to word sketch, and then we analyzed sickness. So they analyzed, okay, motion sickness, altitude sickness, morning sickness, radiation sickness. So they realized that language is conventionalized, and they cannot use one word for another one freely. So they should respect this convention. So we also use word sketch difference so that they could compare. For example, in this case, we use illness and sickness. So, and then we move on to diseases. They said, okay, we have like heart, lung disease, so parts of the body, and then we have also names, right? Names for some disease, so Crohn's, Alzheimer's disease, etc. So they started coming to some conclusions, which also help them understand the complexity of the language. And I think that these reflections also help them develop collocational and phraseological competence, right? And then we prepared some activities that they had to extract the collocations and put them according to a taxonomy, so adjectival collocations, verbal collocations, etc. Okay, so thinking of, as I mentioned, other languages as well. So I talked about Mark Davis' site, so we can also use Corpus do Português. We don't have a lot of possibilities for Portuguese, which is a problem. So, but you can. This one is much better now. So students, Brazilian researchers can also have access to it, so that they can apply DDL in their classes. Of course, nothing compares. So, in Corpus del Espanhol, Corpus do Português, they cannot be compared to the English corpora because there is a wide range of possibilities in here. They're much bigger, etc. But anyway, at least we have something free to use. Okay, now focusing on phraseography. What do we understand, by phraseography? So we are using Oliveira Silva's definition. So phraseography is a linguistic discipline, like phraseology, and it deals on the one hand with theoretical, practical principles governing the inclusion of phraseology. Obviously, that's the object, phraseological units in lexical compilations, dictionaries, glossaries, etc., both specialized and general. And on the other hand, it also deals with the critical, just a minute, please. Oops, sorry. The critical study of these compilations with regard to the treatment of phraseology, which means to say that the scope of interest of phraseography ranges from typographic presentation to its adaptation to users. And then, as I said, so we're talking about phraseography, and then due to corpus linguistics, life of lexicographers, and I can say phraseographers, have changed completely and for better, right? So it deals with the theoretical and practical principles, as I've just said, concerned extraction, analysis, and inclusion of phraseologies in phraseographical works. This time, the methodology has changed, so investigations and the development of phraseographic work are now conducted after this interface with corpus linguistics through the use and exploration of corpora, lexical analysis tools, and also based on frequency data, statistical measures, among other issues. We may mention some of them here today. So all of this may offer, we believe that it does offer, so it depends on the research, but I do believe that offers greater reliability, because now we're not just being like, okay, we're making up examples for the dictionary. We are using real examples for the dictionary, and all our data is corpus-based and also based on statistical measures, which proves that those combinations, either collocations or any other phraseological units, are relevant and frequently used in that language. So that's just wonderful for all of us. So large corpora provide phraseographers with enough evidence to decide what to include and, most importantly, what to leave out. So if you compare present dictionaries to, like, if you think of 20 years ago, it's completely different, right? Even a little bit more nowadays, because I'm growing older. So things in a few years ago, I say 30 years ago, etc. So a lot of things have changed. So in the past, there were many words which were not relevant for learners or translators. Nowadays, a lot of things we search for, we find, because what we're searching for is frequently used. So these are words or combinations that we see everywhere, and they are in the dictionaries because of that, right? Okay, I think I already mentioned that. Okay, so large corpora allow analysts to identify and evaluate, for example, collocations. So this is something that was difficult to do in the past, right? Especially because of the statistical measures, as I said. And then according to Hank, he was talking about electronic lexicography, and then I applied that to corpus-based phraseography. The context was neglected, or at least, or at best, considered kind of optional extra. In the dictionaries of the future, contextualization and phraseology will occupy the central place. So that was in 2012. So it's already happening, right? And then if you think of phraseography and corpus-based phraseography, so corpus conception now, the corpus compilation. So in the past they were printed and then they were scanned, and then scanned. Now it's done in automatic mode. So now we have corpora automatically compiled. Corpus size has changed as well. So now we deal with greater data storage capacity. Software to annotate corporate data, lemmatizers, taggers, parsers, research methodology. Nowadays we count on lexical analysis tools and software, and also we have the help of computational linguists, right? Linguistics, so that they help us improve the extraction, and we have to deal with more data, that's for sure. But anyway, we can do it faster. So the way of observing and analyzing data has changed. Phraseographical treatment. So due to those theoretical changes, given its interface with corpus linguistics, it has changed. The way we treat phraseological units, the way we treat data has changed. Consequently, phraseographical decisions have changed. So I'll talk about that later on. Well, I'm running out of time, but anyway, so I'll be briefly talking about that later on, because now we're coping with a lot of data, and then we lexicographers or phraseographers have to be in charge of validating all of that data. And then it is a lot of responsibility. So the very postured tasks, the role of the phraseographer in terms of selecting, synthesizing information to validate choices, as I just said, and edit. So a role of great skill and in-depth knowledge of the language. So I particularly believe that phraseographers nowadays have a big responsibility in the sense of dealing with all that data. So what can I do with all that data? Okay, I think this is a repetition. I think Randall also mentioned, so if you think of challenges and future perspectives, so he talks about the access to billion word corpora, right, and all the data, so it's a repetition. Yeah, I think I've already mentioned that. So it's even nowadays, in the past few years, so researchers are also questioning the role of dictionaries, right? And will you have dictionaries in the future? So Nielsen says that possible answers depend, among other things, what we mean by the term dictionary. So things have changed so fast. So we are dealing with a great amount of data, automatic compilation of corpora, statistical measures, so all done automatically. So how will dictionaries be in the future? Will the audience really need a dictionary? So thinking of all those lexical analysis tools, right? So he says that what we mean by the term dictionary and the time frame involved. So that would depend on that. So experience shows that the new artifacts have eventually replaced existing ones in most, if not all cases, right? Though it would be imprudent to think that dictionaries would disappear. So I don't think it will, at least in the next 10 years, I believe, but I don't hope so, because I'm compiling one, right? And Grafenstadt also wrote a paper in 2008, The Future of Linguistics and Lexicographers. Will there be lexicographers in the year 2003? We don't have too much time to talk about that. But anyway, at that time, so as you can see, so it was in 2008. So he talked about a lot of new tools that were being developed. Nowadays, we can see those tools already. So he was just thinking of that those changes for future, and then it's already happening. So we can see that it has changed, really. And he mentioned that there are obviously tests that only humans can do. So I completely agree with that. Yeah. So, but he claims that lexicographers may play an increasingly smaller role in this lexicographical or phraseographical, also applying to phraseographical process. So I don't think that's quite a small role, because as I said, the responsibility is high, and dealing with that amount of data is a lot, right? So this one I very sad. And this is also interesting, right? So some reflections, will these users be able to infer meanings from the examples? Okay, if there are many resources, as I've just mentioned, so will users really be able to infer meanings from examples? Won't they need a dictionary? Because dictionaries kind of organize all those reflections in, for example, of an entry, for example. Everything's very well organized there, so they just see that organized. So I think it's much easier. So it's time consuming. Using all those tools may be time consuming, and they may be they're misguided, or they're misleading. Their conclusions may be misleading. So they may make mistakes, especially if they're translating a text. So I still think that dictionaries are really important. Yeah, so as Randell says, all these issues raise questions about the future of lexicography. And I like this. Have I been colluding in a process that will lead to my own redundancy? So researchers are developing new tools, and then maybe everything will collude and will lead to their own redundancy. But I don't think it's quite like that. So he also asks, is there still a role for informed human judgment? So I do think it does, and I think that the role of a lexicographer, a phraseographer, is highly important, and it will continue being like that in the next, maybe, let's say, 2 decades, maybe. Okay, so let me skip this because I'm running out of time. So this part, I wish I had more time to talk about the importance of dictionaries. So we believe that dictionaries can be regarded as an important pedagogical tool to develop a collocational competence. Obviously, as I'm compiling a dictionary of collocations, I have to support that idea, yeah, but other writers also think of that. So according to Neshkovska, I don't think it's the right pronunciation, but anyway, training students to regularly consult collocation dictionaries is highly recommended by foreign language researchers in general. She adds that collocation dictionaries can be a significant tool when it comes to mastering collocations. So I do agree with her, right? The author also addresses the issue of foreign language learners being encouraged to look up words in dictionaries of collocations on a regular basis. So I believe that the students have to be more exposed to dictionary. They have to learn how to use a dictionary, and dictionaries do help. So teachers are also advised to develop activities based on collocation dictionaries. So this is also interesting, because that's a way of giving the right value to dictionaries and learning from dictionaries, right? Roselle and Devodi carried out a research on the influence of electronic dictionaries, and it can also apply to online dictionaries on vocabulary knowledge. And they say that even though the investigation does not focus on collocations, its results can also be extended or applied to collocation knowledge. So it's vocabulary, but also collocation, right? We can apply to that, regarding that a high proportion of language formulaic nature, etc., etc. So the authors concluded that the use of the electronic dictionary can indeed improve vocabulary learning. Okay, authors also point out that students reported more interest and motivation to learn new words when they use electronic dictionaries. So we can also apply to online dictionaries because they're used to sources like that, right? And we also claim that it can also be extended to online collocations, online dictionaries or collocation dictionaries. But we have to think of that, right? So owing to the multiple modes of presentation and interesting eye-catching nature of electronic dictionaries. So that makes a big difference, right? So they are embraced more easily by language learners in their attempt to learn new words in a foreign language setting. Another, so the presentation of the special issue of Revista Internacional de Línguas Extranjeras on digital pedagogic lexicography stresses the importance of digital dictionaries for language teaching. So as you can see, there are many researchers who talk about the importance and the important role of dictionaries to learn vocabulary and to learn collocations and to develop collocational and phraseological competence if it's a general language dictionary. Okay, so thinking of contributions and applications of corpus-based phraseology and phraseography, so under the scope of this project funded by FAPESP, so we have developed, we're still in the process, obviously, because even though I've been working on this dictionary, I was working on bilingual dictionary for over 8 years, so it takes time to produce something that I particularly believe that will be very with a good quality and good result and with reliable data. So that's the platform Multilingual Collocations Dictionary. So you can choose the language, so you can use it as a monolingual dictionary, bilingual, trilingual, whatever you want to. So you can have access to it, but you can register, and I'm not making it available yet because we're still analyzing data. So you can register, and then I'll send you an email as soon as it's available for users, right? Next year, probably. So we were working with many languages, as I said, Brazilian Portuguese, American English. We have to work on that idea as well, because American and British English, French, but French can be the Canadian French and French from France, Spanish, and Chinese. So this is our team. So we're working with people from different languages from different countries, from Universidade de Alcalá, da Coruña, Santiago de Compostela, Universidade de Montreal, and Universidade de Granada. So these are all our partners. These are our users. So we are thinking of pre-service. Our target audience is pre-service teachers, in-service teachers, language learners, researchers and lexicographers, learner and professional translators, and material developments. We have already set the features of each audience. We don't have time to talk about that. So everything. So we have compiled corpus automatically, and all information were automatically extracted, and that's why I said, okay, we're working with a huge number of collocations, and then we have to validate them all, right? So corpora were also compiled automatically. They were parsed as well. So corpora are in Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, and Chinese for each language, obviously. So we focus on collocation types with 3 morphosyntactic classes of bases, so nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So as I said, they were automatically extracted. Bases were automatically extracted, first of all, and then we validated them. After that, collocations were extracted, and we are still validating them. So we use statistical measures, so T-score, Z-score, and some other scores, but we are still analyzing that, and we're going to choose the best one to work with. This is the output. So we have the base, collocate, their frequency, and all those the statistical values that we used. And these are examples. So we automatically extracted 8 examples, and then we also have to validate these examples. So that's why I'm saying that it takes time. So users, we have access to the platform, so it's for free, right? So they don't need to register for the new version of it. So as you can see, you have the entry here, signature, a definition for the entry, and then under each definition, you have different collocations with examples. So you have one, but you can see more examples if you wish. So we have a verb plus signature. So we have a verbal collocation, then adjective plus signature like digital signature. And then we also have an advanced menu. so you can have access to more information. Then you have to register, because you want to see your profile. You want to see what type of users want to have access to the platform. So, and then in this case, you have, for example, the entry is a verb, sign, the definition again. So we have the collocation digitally signed. As you can see, you have the frequency of the collocation, the frequency of the entry, and then you can also choose to check, for example, some statistical measures, so T-score, mute information, dice, etc. So you can also choose, for example, the translations, right? So in this case, I chose Spanish and English. So we have, for example, plan, develop a plan, for example, the collocation, and then you have, in Portuguese, desenvolver plano, with this example as well. And then you also have, for example, phrasal verb plus plan, come up with the plan. And then you have propor plano in Portuguese and idear plan in Spanish. So you can choose the languages you wish, in French or in Chinese. I got stuck in here. Okay. And then to teach collocations, right? So we also have this platform. It's a pity that we haven't had financial support to improve it, but we are doing it now. So I believe that next year it will also be available. More activity will be available. So we got stuck there. We just have we have different, as you can see, it comes from different corpora. So different students helped compile these corpora, because we are working with different areas. So general language, medicine, business, politics, academic language, investigation, etc. So you have a memory game. So you can select the number of pairs. You can also, as I said, select the category: academic language, business, politics, etc., investigation. And then you can play the game. So you memorize the collocations, for example, to lose an argument, to provide an explanation, etc., draw an analogy, and so on and so forth. And then you can play it. This is from the investigation section. So Caldas, a student of mine, compiled a corpus of TV series from CNN, CSI, I'm sorry, etc. And then she extracted some collocations that were used to feed the platform. And then you also have gap fill. Okay, it's an ordinary game type of activity, yeah, but it's quite useful. Cambridge, along, they always use this type of exercise in their books. So it's a good way of learning collocation. So you can also choose the taxonomy. So I just want to work with verbal collocations, adjectival collocations, up to you. And then you have the examples, and you can drag the word. For example, responsible, you think it's number 2, so you drag that word in here. So you can ask the system to check for you. So there were 2 mistakes. So either you correct them themselves, or you ask the system to show you the right answer. So that, so far we had, this is the register. You can have access to all collocations you learned. And as I said, in the near future, it will be 2 different activities will be available, hopefully next year. Okay, so just to finish, we have talked about, just a minute, I can see someone to admit, DDL and corpora applications in foreign language learning and translation training, some corpus-based phraseology and phraseography concepts, some reflections only. Even though we have 1 hour, it doesn't seem to be a lot. Contributions in the relevance of corpus-based phraseology and phraseography, foreign language teaching and translation training, mainly regarding development of phraseological and collocational competence. That's our focus. We talked about corpus-based phraseography changes, challenges, and new perspectives. The importance of collocations, dictionaries, and applications of corpus-based phraseography in foreign language teaching, translation training, and practice, with a view as well to develop learners' collocational competence. So thank you very much for being here with us. And now I'm ready for questions, comments, or any suggestions you may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much, Adriane. Before I stop the recording and make room for questions, I'm just going to again share the details of our next upcoming talk, which should be somewhere around here. We're going to leave it. There we are. We have our own, UQ's own Dr. Martin Schweinberger presenting next week. And I realized we actually got quite a few people who came on the hour. We did send out some correspondence about the time change in Europe, but I guess a few of you must have missed that. So from this week as well as next week, if you're in Europe, the time will be 11 o'clock, I believe, rather than 12, so 1 hour earlier. Brisbane doesn't change time, unlike Sydney, so we apologize for not picking up on that, but the recording will be available very, very, very soon. Watch this space for Brisbane time tomorrow. We will distribute the link to everyone who registered to the recording. Next week we have Martin, who's going to present on an evaluation of computational corpus-based approaches to language learning. So this combination of working on computational linguistics together with corpus linguistics to look at language learning, focusing on researchers that analyze language teaching and learning, language teachers that use corpus technology in their classrooms, and students learning an additional language in a classroom setting. So we're very excited to have Martin present with us next week. I hope that everyone will tune in for that. But for now, we are going to take some questions for Adriane. I'm going to stop the recording here, but I hope to see as many of you for next week's session as possible. For those who can't make that session, thanks for joining here. And I'd just like to take this time just to thank Adriane for her talk and to give her a round of applause in Zoom land. Basically means just me clapping by myself. But I'm sure you're all clapping from the comfort of your own armchairs in any case. So thanks everyone. I'm going to stop the recording here and then we'll take on those questions. So